Hey everybody, Ty here. I hope everyone is doing well. We've made it to the weekend and also to the beginning of August. I was saying in yesterday's video, and I honestly have to say it again, it's just surreal that we've gotten this far into the year already. It's been quite a year. It's been a very fast year. We're kind of in a weird spot with the weather right now. We're dealing with a pretty big pattern shift right now, as we mentioned in the last couple of videos, especially with the outlook that we talked about. We're going to start to see more heat building out towards the west. But with this pattern shift, there's still opportunities for severe weather. There is a slight risk today that's been issued over towards the western high plains in particular. All three hazards are possible with this, and this of course includes a tornado threat. We even have a small 5% area that's popped up over towards northeastern parts of Colorado, heading into southeastern parts of Wyoming, and even a tiny little chunk of southwestern Nebraska here. Most of this will be rural land, so for the most part I wouldn't expect too many people under the line of under the gun here, but even so, definitely need to be weather aware today. Biggest threat definitely seems to be hail, but again, wind and tornado threat is also at slight risk parameters as well. We head into the following day, we also have a slight risk as well. We have a pretty broad 2% area right now. We have to also keep an eye on things to see if we end up getting upgrade with that, because we didn't even have I don't think we had a 2% tornado threat yesterday. It just randomly went up as time went on. That's due in large part to a couple of parameters that we will probably talk about in future videos, going over what MCV and MCS is. This will make this into a 45-minute video, which I'm sure no one really wants to see. But if you do want to see that in a Weather Nerd 101 video, definitely let me know in the comments. As far as tomorrow's concerned, though, it's a pretty similar look for the most part. Now, there are a couple of things I do want to make mention of as well, especially with today's risk, and this is also out towards anyone that's over towards the southeast and the deep south. We do have a marginal risk, and this will mainly be revolving around the damaging wind threat. We have a setup in the lower levels of the atmosphere here to where we would be able to see potentially a wet microburst. The parameters are set in such a way to where we're going to have heavy rain, and flash flooding would also be possible towards these areas. But for the most part, I'm expecting just a really messy afternoon and evening commute from a lot of these areas, from Wilmington and Charlotte all the way back towards Jackson here. By the time we get towards day 3, if we were to go back, we have a marginal risk once again. We'll keep an eye on it and see how things go, but it looks like at this point our attention has really started to shift a bit more from the northern plains to the western high plains. So severe weather potential still remains, but the level of threat, I would say at this point, is still unknown. It's pretty much been the same old song and dance for this summertime here. Now, before we get in any further into the 4 to 8 day outlook, which is predictability too low, I bet you're wondering, why do I have a weather model here? This is HRRR. We're going to take a little bit of a closer look at tonight's setup, just a little bit here, because there is a small chance we might go live. And I'm thinking about maybe implementing this style in future videos. If you like it, of course, again, definitely let me know in the comments. But as far as tonight goes, what we're going to be paying attention to is this area over here towards the western high plains. And it looks like our storm initiation definitely seems like it begins a little bit earlier than usual. I would say right at about maybe 5 o'clock Central Time. We're kind of flirting with that mountain time zone as well, so you may want to give an extra hour in between here, because I can never really quite remember exactly where the line falls on here, but it's pretty daggone close to where we have that storm initiation. So like I said, it's a little bit touch and go on the timing here, but for the most part I would say somewhere between 4 and 6 o'clock, whether it's central or mountain time, would be the point of interest where we would expect some development to occur. As far as that marginal risk for the southeast, I would expect things to really start to get going here by the time you see this video go up, and then we'll kind of be touch and go from that point. But it does look like business is picking up based off what I'm seeing here on radar at the time of me making this video, so I will only expect things to develop further. Big component, of course, as we mentioned before, will really have a lot more to do with the forward motion of the storm and really just the timing in general, because one thing about these summertime storms is they aren't necessarily the quickest of movers, so they can drop a lot of rainfall very quickly, and there's a lot of moisture available in these areas as well. So quick little rehash of what we were talking about earlier this week, I would say, in regards to the weather pattern. We're mainly going to be putting our focus on what's ahead here, especially since we're starting a new month as well. So we're going to just put both of these in motion. We already know the deal. Ridge is going to be building out towards the west, and this is going to help enhance our severe weather potential towards the western high plains for the earlier part of this week. Eventually, as this ridge builds, we're going to see a little bit more activity coming back to the northern plains here and towards the Midwest, and then eventually this becomes more of a pattern that's favorable for the Great Lakes. Especially as you see this ridge begin to push off west, we start to see some troughing beginning to come into play here. It's most prominent particularly on the GFS here, but if we were to look at the Euro here, what you'll notice is it takes a little bit longer for things to kind of get going there, and there's not quite as strong of a signal for troughing until we get later down the line in this model run here. But it does look like eventually, like the GFS, the Euro shows a little bit more troughing, and it's more favorable for the Midwest, not quite as much towards the Ohio Valley and Great Lakes. So jury's still out in the long range here, but based off the trend that I'm seeing, there's a couple extra things we will be taking note of in the future here. So of course, we'll go ahead and see how that translates on the lower levels of the atmosphere. And what we'll notice is pretty similar look. Usually what we see towards the upper levels usually translates pretty well towards the mid levels. It's usually the lower levels during this time of year that's a big question. One other thing that I've made note of as well is, of course, tropical development off the shores here. So this is going to increase rip currents. As far as any sort of impact from a tropical system right now, I'm not too concerned. I will be watching the Gulf towards the back half of this model run because there is an increasing chance of development maybe beginning to show up here. I've been looking at models on and off over the last few days, keeping track of this area over here towards the Caribbean. It seems like like both the operational models try to have something develop here. None of the operational runs have really latched onto anything, and this is why I'm still not making too much of a fuss about it, but I am mentioning it in this video just in case something does get going. Like I said, nothing to really be concerned about or raise the brow like you're Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, but still, fact of the matter is, we're in the middle of hurricane season, and you always need to be watchful for anything that develops out here. It's pretty much open season at this point. So let's go ahead and take a look at the temperatures, and this is probably my favorite part of this video here, is talking about how the temperatures kind of drop off towards my area. For some of you, you're not going to get all that much in the way of relief, especially if you're over towards central Texas and maybe the southern plains, and especially towards the southwest. I feel for you. It's still going to be pretty daggone hot over there, especially towards the southwest, where we're dealing with 110s, even 115s and higher there. It's that time of year. This is nothing new for you guys, but even so, all I can say is ouch. But I mean, I'll be honest, I don't envy you. I'm an outdoor worker, so I would much rather deal with what I have here, and it looks like it's pretty nice over towards where I am, thankfully, for a change. Because those last couple weeks were pretty brutal. There were some nicer days sprinkled in between for those of us on the eastern half of the Rockies and the Mississippi, but it's still going to be relatively warm. Like, anyone who said to you that you should bring out the sweaters or anything like that, don't believe them. It's a little bit of an exaggeration. I think they were reading the CPC maps a little bit too in-depthly instead of actually looking at the temperature values. Anyway, enough rambling about that. We're going to, of course, put that in conjunction with our dew point map here. This is a look at where our relative humidity and dew point and our relative moisture in general is going to be the highest, of course. And we're mainly kind of looking at this point more so towards our shower, storm, and severe weather activity. But what I'm paying the most attention to on this map here, because both of these are GFS, by the way, just to make it clear, I'm trying to look at our moisture return and try to get a better idea of what our severe potential could be Because one thing I always look for when it comes to the more notable threats is the spread between the dew points and the surface temperature here. The closer those two are together, the greater potential for all hazards of severe weather, especially tornadoes. The more spread apart they are, you tend to get more along the lines maybe of a hail threat, sometimes a damaging wind threat. Those will be better highlighted in SKUTs, and if you want, I can give you a basic rundown about how I read them. I wouldn't claim myself to be a full-on expert, but I have a pretty good idea of how things work with that. Again, let me know in the comments. But either way, it does look like we're going to see pretty much the same old song and dance if you're anywhere towards the eastern parts of the Mississippi here, and some parts west as well. We're going to have plenty of moist air to work with, and this is going to be a big part of our flooding threat over towards the eastern states. Where we have our threat tonight, I would say, is going to be mainly over towards northeast and of course the deep south. A lot of that's going to have to do with these dew points being in the 70s, a lot of ambient moisture in the atmosphere here. So from this point, we're going to take the double screen off here. We're going to go back to our single here, and we're mainly going to be putting our focus towards the instability that we have in the air as well. It takes multiple parameters to produce severe weather. A lot of people liken it to baking a cake, and especially with our areas of interest over the next couple of days, the instability is there. We have sufficient moisture. It's not crazy like what we're seeing over here towards the deep south, but you combine that with a little bit of wind shear and some lift, and that's all you really need to get things going here. Of course, there's more intricacies to it, but that's just a basic rundown here. Of course, over towards the western plains, at least to start out the week, it looks like conditions are going to be more than favorable as we go through the first several days here. And this is when I'm really interested in things picking up here for a threat, maybe of a damaging wind threat in particular, because we're getting into some pretty high Cape values here, a lot of instability available at this point. About 4,000 joules is pretty impressive, actually pushing maybe even towards 4,500. Now if we rewind this back and we look at the deep south here, where the weather pattern is also anticipated to be stormy, notice we also have a lot of energy here, so we'll need to keep an eye on these areas as well. Now as we move forward, what we're going to be putting a little bit more emphasis on, of course, is going to be over towards the northern plains and the Midwest. Look at these Cape values in particular. This is heading into Wednesday evening here, where we see Cape nearing 6,000 joules per kilogram, which is an explosive environment. If you've watched my videos before, I always say the threshold is usually about 750 to 1,000. You could really get stronger storms at 500. But when you start seeing stuff like this, that is always an eye-opener nonetheless. Now if we keep this moving, you'll see that we'll continue to see that progression kind of move off to the east here. So as we start to see more of that troughing beginning to occur, our attention kind of shifts over towards the Ohio Valley a bit, maybe even towards the mid-Atlantic and northeast before all is said and done. We could still have storms that pop up in other areas, but this is where but the areas where we have the highest amount of Cape is where we are a little bit more likely to have our severe potential as well. And I just knocked my drink over. Damn it. But anyways, let's go ahead and get into the final part of this video here. We're going to take a look at the precipitation rate here. And as I've mentioned before, where we'll have the greatest areas of interest, of course, is going to be over towards the deep south, where day after day we'll have shower and storm potential. Most of that will be occurring in the afternoon. Now when we look at the other stuff here from the northern plains onward, especially as we get past the 5-day mark, we'll kind of have a good idea of where that trough ends up setting up here as we go further and further along here. Again, here's that potential for some tropical development offshore here. It's going to raise rip current concerns, but as far as an impact is concerned, you would see this push out and out to sea here, and this isn't going to be much of an issue. Towards the end of the model run, we are going to have to look over towards the Caribbean for some potential development. A low pressure does pop up here, but it doesn't really manifest into anything of significance as of right now. Now, keep in mind, we were at the tail end of the model run there, so that can easily change. So we'll have to pay extra close attention to that. As we mentioned before, we're getting closer and closer to peak hurricane season, which is a few weeks away from now and lasts through a good chunk of September as well. So, like I said, a lot. We're going to be paying some pretty close attention to some particular features on this model run that we've talked about here in this new slew of models. But that being said, appreciate you guys being here. Hope you guys have a good weekend. We'll see what we have for a video tomorrow. But until then, everyone take care and have a wonderful rest of your Friday.